Inside was a handwritten letter on legal pad paper, Marcus's careful printing filling 3 pages. Dear Margaret, there's no apology I can write that will undo what I've done to you. No words that can give you back the 4 years and $67,000 I helped steal. But I wanted you to know the full truth before I testify. My mother groomed me from childhood to do this. Her first marriage to my biological father fell apart when he discovered what she was doing to terminal patients at the hospital where she worked in the 1990s. He threatened to turn her in, so she divorced him and moved us to Arizona for a fresh start. She got a job at Banner Good Samaritan and immediately started targeting vulnerable patients again. Your husband Richard was her favorite. She talked about him constantly when I was a teenager. How handsome he was, how kind, how he deserved better than his wife. She said you were cold and distant, that you'd abandoned Richard in his dying days, none of which was true, but I believed her. When Richard died, she kept his ring and his photo and, yes, a lock of his hair. She said she'd loved him and he'd loved her, that if he'd survived, he would have left you for her. She built this entire fantasy relationship in her head. Then she discovered Richard had a daughter, you had a daughter. And she became obsessed with the idea that she could have what should have been hers. Richard's family, Richard's legacy, Richard's money. She waited 7 years, researching Jessica's life, finding out she'd become a teacher, learning she'd attend that conference in Tucson. She sent me to that conference with a script, told me exactly what to say to Jessica, how to approach her, what to do to make her fall in love with me. And it worked, because my mother is a master manipulator who's been perfecting her craft for 30 years. I didn't love Jessica when I married her. I liked her. She was sweet and kind, but it wasn't love, it was a job. But over 4 years, something changed. I started to actually care about her. And the guilt of what we were doing to you started eating me alive. I know this doesn't matter. I know I still lied and stole and manipulated, but I wanted you to know your daughter is a victim too. My mother chose her, groomed her, used her, and I helped do it because I was too weak to stand up to my mother and too selfish to walk away from the money. I'm testifying against my parents because they deserve prison, but I also deserve it. So I'm not asking for mercy or forgiveness. I'm just asking that you remember Jessica was targeted from age 8. She never had a chance. I'm sorry, Margaret, for everything. Marcus. I read the letter twice, then handed it back to Jessica. Keep it, she said. I've already read it. He wanted you to have the original. Jessica, do you believe him? That he started to care about you? She looked at me with eyes full of tears and something that might have been hope. I don't know, Mom, but I want to believe that some part of our marriage was real. Because if none of it was real, then I've wasted the past 4 years of my life on a complete lie. You have wasted them, I said gently but firmly. Whether Marcus developed real feelings or not, the foundation of your marriage was fraud. You can't build something genuine on a lie. I know. God, I know. I've filed for divorce. It'll be final in 6 months. She wiped her eyes. Mom, can I ask you something? What? After this is all over, after the trial, after they're in prison, after I've repaid every dollar, is there any chance you'll let me be your daughter again? Not right away, I know. But someday? I looked at this young woman who'd betrayed me so completely, who'd been victimized herself, but had also made conscious choices to continue the victimization of others. My daughter, my betrayer, my child. Ask me in 5 years, I said finally. After you've proven through your actions, not your words, that you've changed. After you've spent years making amends. After you've shown me that you understand the magnitude of what you've done. Ask me then, and we'll see. 5 years. Jessica nodded slowly. Okay, I can do that. I will do that. She turned to leave, then stopped. Mom, one more thing. Ruth's lawyer is going to try to destroy you on the stand. She's going to claim you seduced Dad away from her, that you're lying about everything, that you're doing this out of jealousy. I just wanted you to be prepared. Let her try, I said. I have 28 years of marriage to Richard before Ruth ever met him. I have medical records, I have witness testimony, I have her own admission on tape. Let her spin whatever fantasy she wants, the truth will destroy her. After Jessica left, I sat in my apartment with Marcus's letter, thinking about the tangled web of victims and perpetrators, of people who'd been hurt and people who'd done the hurting, often being the same people at different times. Ruth was a monster, but she'd also created more monsters, or at least, more victims who became accomplices. How many lives had she destroyed in 30 years? How many families had been torn apart by her schemes? Tomorrow, the discovery process would begin. Tomorrow, the prosecution would start building their case. Tomorrow, justice would inch forward another step. But tonight, I was simply a 74-year-old woman eating enchiladas in a shabby apartment, wearing her dead husband's ring, and trying to believe that maybe, finally, the nightmare was ending. Ruth Patterson was in jail, and I was free. For the first time in 22 years, I was finally, truly free. The trial began on a cold January morning, 3 months after the arrests. I'd spent those months in a strange limbo, free from the Pattersons' manipulation, but trapped by the legal process that required me to relive every moment of betrayal in depositions, pre-trial hearings, and meetings with prosecutors. If this scene touched your heart, tap like to let me know it resonated with you. Do you see a glimpse of your own story in theirs? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. The Maricopa County Superior Court building loomed over downtown Phoenix, all glass and concrete and institutional authority. I arrived at 8:30 a.m., flanked by Mr. Weber on one side and Detective O'Connor on the other. A small army of reporters waited on the courthouse steps, shouting questions I didn't answer. Inside, the courtroom was already packed. I recognized faces from the Victim Services Support Group. Linda Martinez had connected me with other elderly people who'd been defrauded by family members, who'd come to witness what they hoped would be justice for all of us. Carlos and his wife Maria sat in the third row, giving me encouraging nods. My sister Diana had flown in from Chicago and sat directly behind the prosecution table, her presence a steady comfort. And there, on the other side of the courtroom, separated from me by what felt like an ocean of polished wood and legal propriety, sat Ruth Patterson. She'd aged a decade in 3 months. Jail had stripped away the designer clothes, the professional hair color, the expensive makeup. Her auburn hair showed 2 inches of gray roots. Her skin was sallow, her eyes shadowed with sleeplessness. She wore an orange jumpsuit that hung loose on her frame. She'd lost weight, probably from stress and institutional food. But when our eyes met across that courtroom, I saw no remorse, no shame, only pure, burning hatred. She mouthed something at me. I couldn't make out the words, but her lawyer quickly put a hand on her arm, whispering urgently. Ruth's face flushed red, but she stayed silent. Gilbert sat beside her, looking smaller somehow, diminished. The confident man who'd poured $65 wine and lied about his wife's medical emergencies was gone, replaced by someone who seemed confused about how he'd ended up here. Marcus sat at a separate table with his own attorney. He'd taken a plea deal in exchange for his testimony. 15 years, eligible for parole in 10 with good behavior. Jessica wasn't in the courtroom. As a witness, she couldn't attend the proceedings until after she testified. Judge Patricia Morrison entered, and we all rose. She was a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She'd built a reputation as tough but fair, exactly what this case needed. The state of Arizona versus Ruth Sarah Patterson and Gilbert James Patterson, she announced. Charges include 14 counts of financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, conspiracy to commit fraud, engaging in a pattern of racketeering activity, and witness intimidation. How do the defendants plead? Ruth's lawyer stood. Not guilty on all counts, Your Honor. Gilbert's lawyer echoed the same. Judge Morrison nodded. Let's proceed with opening statements. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Catherine Reyes, stood and addressed the jury, 12 people who would decide Ruth's fate, who would determine whether my suffering meant anything in the eyes of the law. Ladies and gentlemen, over the next 2 weeks, you're going to hear a story that will disturb you. A story of a nurse who preyed on dying patients and their families. A story spanning 30 years, 6 known victims, and a conspiracy so calculated, so methodical, that it took decades for one brave woman to finally expose it. Margaret Bennett, who you'll hear from today, is 74 years old. She's a retired teacher who worked for 40 years educating children. She was married to Richard Bennett for 35 years before he died of cancer in 2003. And for the last 22 years, she's been the target of Ruth Patterson's obsession. You'll hear evidence that Ruth Patterson, while working as a certified nursing assistant at Banner Good Samaritan Hospital, systematically exploited Richard Bennett during his final 6 weeks of life. She convinced him to give her his wedding ring. She took a lock of his hair. She created a fantasy relationship in her mind that continued long after his death. And then, 14 years later, she positioned her son Marcus to accidentally meet Richard's daughter Jessica. She orchestrated their relationship, their marriage, and then spent 4 years draining Margaret Bennett of over $67,000 while claiming her family was destitute. But Mrs. Bennett fought back. She documented everything. She saved receipts, she recorded conversations, and she exposed a criminal enterprise that had been operating for 3 decades. By the end of this trial, you'll have no doubt that Ruth Patterson is a predator who belongs in prison. Thank you. Ruth's attorney, a sleek man named David Thornton who probably charged $500 an hour, stood for the defense opening. Ladies and gentlemen, what you're about to witness is a tragedy, but not the tragedy the prosecution wants you to see. The real tragedy is an elderly woman, Margaret Bennett, who has allowed jealousy and bitterness to poison her memories and destroy a family. Yes, Ruth Patterson was Richard Bennett's caregiver. Yes, he gave her gifts. Dying patients often give gifts to caregivers who show them kindness in their final days. That's not exploitation. That's gratitude. Yes, Ruth's son Marcus married Richard's daughter Jessica. Is that suspicious? Or is it simply life, 2 people from connected backgrounds finding love? And yes, Margaret Bennett gave money to her daughter and son-in-law over 4 years. But she gave that money freely, voluntarily, as a mother who wanted to help her children. She never complained. She never said no. She gave and gave because that's what families do. The prosecution will try to paint Ruth Patterson as a monster. But what they're really showing you is a woman who cared for a dying man, whose son fell in love with that man's daughter, and who accepted help from her daughter-in-law's mother during difficult times. That's not a crime. That's a family. Margaret Bennett is bitter that Richard formed a connection with his caregiver in his final days. She's jealous that Ruth provided him comfort when she couldn't. And she's weaponizing the legal system to punish Ruth for crimes that exist only in her imagination. Don't let bitterness masquerade as justice. Thank you. I felt rage building in my chest as Thornton sat down, looking pleased with himself. He just told the jury that I was a jealous, bitter old woman making up stories. That my documented evidence was just the paranoid fantasies of someone who couldn't accept that her husband had preferred his nurse. Mrs. Bennett, Mr. Weber whispered beside me. Breathe. We knew he'd go this route. We're prepared. The prosecution called their first witness, Carlos Rodriguez. Carlos took the stand and was sworn in, his hand steady on the Bible. Prosecutor Reyes walked him through his testimony, how he'd worked at Walmart for 12 years, how he'd noticed the Pattersons' spending patterns, how he'd overheard conversations, how he'd kept meticulous records. Mr. Rodriguez, why did you document the Pattersons' purchases? Because I saw Mrs. Bennett come into the store every week, counting pennies to buy basic food. And I saw the Patterson family come in the same day, spending hundreds on luxury items. And I heard them talking about how easy it was to get money from the old woman. It made me sick. My own mother was scammed by family. I promised myself I'd never let it happen to someone else if I could help it. Did you know Mrs. Bennett personally? No, she was just a customer. But she reminded me of my mother, kind, polite, struggling. She deserved better than what they were doing to her. The defense attorney cross-examined, trying to suggest Carlos had misheard, misunderstood, or fabricated his testimony. But Carlos didn't waver. He had receipts. He had dates. He had documentation that couldn't be disputed. The jury watched him carefully. I saw several of them taking notes, their expressions troubled. Next came Detective O'Connor, who walked the jury through the investigation, the evidence collected, the pattern of fraud spanning 30 years. She presented the disciplinary record from Banner Good Samaritan, showing Ruth had been fired for exploiting patients. Detective O'Connor, how many other victims did you identify? 6 families over 30 years, in addition to Mrs. Bennett. All followed the same pattern. Ruth Patterson befriended a terminally ill patient, learned about their family and finances, then maintained contact or positioned family members to access the deceased's assets after death. Were criminal charges filed in those earlier cases? No. Most families settled privately to avoid publicity. But we have declarations from 3 of those families supporting Mrs. Bennett's case. Then came the financial experts who analyzed my bank statements and the Pattersons' spending, showing the direct correlation between money leaving my account and luxury purchases appearing in theirs. By lunch recess on day 3, the prosecution had built an airtight case, but I knew the hardest part was still coming. My testimony. That afternoon, Prosecutor Reyes called my name. I stood on shaking legs and walked to the witness stand. The Bible felt heavy in my hand as I swore to tell the truth. Ruth's eyes burned into me from across the courtroom. I forced myself to look at her directly, to not show fear or weakness. "Mrs. Bennett," Reyes began gently, "please tell the jury about your marriage to Richard Bennett." I took a breath and began. I told them about meeting Richard in 1972, about our wedding in 73, about 35 years of partnership and love. I told them about his cancer diagnosis, his hospitalization, his death, and I told them about Ruth. I never met her during his hospitalization. I was there during the day. She worked nights. But after he died, things started disappearing. His wedding ring, I'd placed it on his finger for burial, but the funeral home said it had been given to the family representative. I thought they meant me, but they wouldn't say who specifically. Did you learn later where the ring had gone? Yes. Ruth Patterson kept it for 22 years hidden in her bedroom. I found it 3 months ago. The defense attorney objected, allegedly found after illegally entering the defendant's home, but Judge Morrison allowed the testimony to continue. For 6 hours over 2 days, I recounted every detail, every manufactured emergency, every lie, every dollar stolen. The jury listened with increasing expressions of horror and sympathy. Then came cross-examination. David Thornton stood, his smile sharp. "Mrs. Bennett, you claim to have loved your husband very much." "I did love him." "Then why weren't you with him when he died?" The question hit like a punch. I had to be home with our 8-year-old daughter. She was having nightmares about losing her father. I planned to return the next morning, but he passed during the night. "So Ruth Patterson was with your husband in his final moments, and you were not." "Because I was caring for our child." "And you resent that, don't you? You resent that Ruth provided comfort to your husband when you couldn't be there." "I resent that she exploited him." "Or is it possible, Mrs. Bennett, that your husband formed a genuine connection with his caregiver, that in his final days he found someone who understood him?" "My husband was dying and confused." "Did Richard ever tell you he was unhappy in your marriage?" The prosecutor objected, but the damage was done. Thornton had planted the seed in the jury's mind that maybe, just maybe, Richard had wanted Ruth's attention. The cross-examination continued for 3 grueling hours. By the end, I was exhausted, but I'd held firm. I hadn't broken. I hadn't given Thornton what he wanted: doubt. The final witness was Jessica. My daughter took the stand, her face pale, her hands shaking. She'd lost 20 pounds in 3 months, aged years in her grief and shame. Prosecutor Reyes walked her through her testimony, the grooming, the manipulation, the lies she'd told at Ruth's direction. "Miss Bennett, did you know when you married Marcus that his mother had been your father's caregiver?" "No. I didn't learn that until 3 months ago." "Did you know Marcus had been sent to that conference specifically to meet you?" "No. I thought it was fate. I thought it was love." "When did you realize you were part of a fraud scheme?" Jessica's voice broke. "When my mother showed me the evidence. When I heard Ruth's recording admitting she'd planned everything. When I realized my entire marriage was a lie designed to access my mother's money." The defense tried to paint Jessica as a willing participant who only flipped when caught. But her testimony, combined with Marcus's earlier deposition, created a clear picture of a young woman who'd been groomed and manipulated. On day 12 of the trial, closing arguments began. Prosecutor Reyes stood before the jury with quiet authority. "Ruth Patterson is a predator. The evidence proves it beyond any doubt. 6 families over 30 years. A pattern of targeting vulnerable people, gaining their trust, and systematically destroying their finances and their lives. Margaret Bennett had the courage to expose her. Now you have the duty to hold her accountable, find her guilty, protect future victims, deliver justice." The defense's closing was desperate: more accusations about my jealousy, more suggestions that Richard had wanted Ruth's attention, more attempts to paint me as vindictive. But the jury wasn't buying it. I could see it in their faces. After 3 hours of deliberation, they returned. "On all counts, we find the defendant Ruth Sarah Patterson guilty. On all counts, we find the defendant Gilbert James Patterson guilty." Ruth screamed, actually screamed, a sound of pure rage and disbelief. Guards had to physically restrain her as she lunged toward me, shouting, "You destroyed me, you jealous bitch. Richard loved me, he loved me." Judge Morrison gavelled for order. "Mrs. Patterson, control yourself or you'll be removed from this courtroom." But Ruth couldn't stop. "I should have had his life. I should have had his daughter. I should have had everything. You stole it from me." As guards dragged her from the courtroom, still screaming, I felt something I hadn't felt in 22 years. Peace. She'd finally revealed herself completely. And justice had won. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. Ruth received 45 years. Gilbert received 30 years. Marcus, having cooperated, received his agreed 15 years. None of them would likely survive their full sentences. Ruth was 64. She'd die in prison. After the sentencing, I walked out of that courthouse into February sunshine, my sister Diana's arm linked through mine, Carlos and Maria walking beside us. "It's over," Diana said. "It's finally over." "No," I corrected gently. "It's finally beginning. My real life. The one I get to build without them." And as we walked away from that building where justice had been served, I touched Richard's ring on my finger and whispered, "We won, my love. We finally won." The nightmare was over. The rest of my life could begin. 5 years later, I stood on the porch of my small house in Gilbert, Arizona. Not the shabby studio apartment in Tempe, but an actual house with 2 bedrooms, a functional kitchen, and a roof that didn't leak. The sun was setting over the desert, painting the sky in those shades of orange and pink that Richard had loved. The civil lawsuit had recovered $43,000 of the $67,000 stolen from me. Not everything, but enough. Enough to put a down payment on this modest house, enough to replace my ancient Honda with a reliable used car, enough to stop counting pennies every time I went to the grocery store. The remaining money came from an unexpected source, a book deal. My memoir, The Receipt of Truth, How I Exposed a Decades-Long Family Fraud, had been published 18 months ago by a small press in Phoenix. I'd never expected it to sell more than a few hundred copies to victim advocacy groups and true crime enthusiasts. Instead, it became a regional bestseller, then a national bestseller when a major publisher picked it up for wider distribution. Suddenly, I wasn't just Margaret Bennett, the elderly victim. I was Margaret Bennett, the author who'd turned her trauma into a tool for helping others. The book sales, combined with speaking fees from victim advocacy conferences and elder abuse prevention seminars, had given me financial security for the first time since Richard died. But more than that, they'd given me purpose. "Grandma Maggie." A small voice called from inside the house. The timer went off. I smiled and walked back into my kitchen. My kitchen, with its new appliances and cheerful yellow walls where my 5-year-old granddaughter Emma stood on a step stool, peering into the oven at the cherry tarts we'd made together. Emma, the miracle I never thought I'd have. She wasn't Jessica's daughter. After the trial, Jessica had divorced Marcus and spent 2 years in intensive therapy, working through the trauma of discovering her entire marriage had been a lie. She'd moved to Flagstaff, taken a teaching job at a small elementary school, and slowly, painfully, rebuilt her life. Emma was Diana's granddaughter. My sister's son had moved his family from Chicago to Phoenix 3 years ago, and they'd become the family I'd needed. Emma called me Grandma Maggie because, as she'd announced at age 3, "You're Aunt Diana's sister, and that makes you my grandma too." I'd cried the first time she said it. "Let's check those tarts," I said, pulling on oven mitts covered in sunflowers, a gift from Carlos and Maria, who'd become 2 of my closest friends. Emma and I carefully removed the tarts from the oven, golden and perfect. "Can I have one now?" "After dinner, your parents will be here in 30 minutes. "But Grandma Maggie, I helped make them. That's why you get the first one after dinner." I kissed the top of her head, breathing in the sweet smell of her strawberry shampoo. "Patience, little one." My phone buzzed. A text from Linda Martinez, the victim advocate who'd sat beside me through my police statement 5 years ago. "Margaret, the support group meeting tonight. Can you come speak? We have 3 new members, all elder fraud victims. They need to hear your story." I typed back, "I'll be there. 7 p.m.? Perfect, thank you." The victim support group met every Thursday evening at the Tempe Public Library. I'd been attending for 5 years now, first as a participant seeking healing, then as a facilitator helping others. Tonight's meeting would be my 247th. I'd lost count of how many people I'd helped through their own journeys from victim to survivor. The doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw a car I didn't recognize, a modest Toyota sedan, well used but clean. A woman got out, maybe early 30s, carrying a folder. I opened the door. "Mrs. Bennett?" She looked nervous. "I'm sorry to drop by unannounced. My name is Rachel Moore. I read your book, and I think my family is doing to me what the Pattersons did to you." I'd received dozens of messages like this over the past 18 months. People who'd read my story and recognized their own situations. People who'd been blind to their own exploitation until they saw it reflected in my words. "Come in," I said gently. "Let me get Emma settled with her grandmother, and then you can tell me everything." An hour later, Rachel and I sat at my kitchen table, the same configuration as 5 years ago when I'd compiled my evidence against Ruth, but this time I was on the other side. This time, I was the one helping someone else see the truth. Rachel's story was heartbreakingly familiar. Her brother and his wife, constantly in crisis, constantly needing money, always with plausible explanations, always making her feel guilty for questioning, always taking while she struggled. "How much have you given them?" I asked. $38,000 over 3 years. I pulled out a legal pad. I kept them stocked now, along with folders and highlighters and all the tools for documenting financial abuse. "Okay, here's what we're going to do. First, you're going to write down every single transaction you can remember." By the time Rachel left 2 hours later, she had a plan. Contact information for Mr. Weber, who'd built a thriving practice representing elder abuse victims, Detective O'Connor's direct line, a list of steps to protect herself financially. And most importantly, the knowledge that she wasn't alone, wasn't crazy, and didn't have to accept abuse disguised as family obligation. "Thank you," Rachel said at the door, tears in her eyes. I thought I was losing my mind. Everyone kept telling me I was being paranoid, that family helps family, that I should be grateful they need me. But reading your book, I realized I'm not paranoid. I'm being robbed. "Yes, you are. But not anymore. You're fighting back now. And Rachel, you're going to win." After she left, I stood on my porch watching the last light fade from the desert sky. 5 years ago, I'd been where Rachel was confused, frightened, betrayed, but I'd fought back. And now I could help others do the same. My phone rang. An unknown number, but I answered anyway these days. Unknown numbers were often people who needed help. "Mrs. Bennett?" A man's voice, older, shaky. "My name is Harold Chen. I saw you speak at the AARP conference in Tucson last month, and I need to tell you something about Ruth Patterson." My blood went cold. "What about her?" "I was married to her. Briefly, in 1992. Before she was Ruth Patterson, she was Ruth Morrison then. I divorced her after 6 months when I discovered she'd been stealing from my dying father. This was the first husband, the one Marcus had mentioned in his letter, the one who discovered what Ruth was doing in the 90s. "Mr. Chen, would you be willing to make a statement? Ruth is in prison now, but there are other victims who could benefit from your testimony for their civil cases. That's why I'm calling. I want to help. I've carried guilt for 30 years that I didn't do more to stop her, that I just divorced her and let her move on to her next victim, your book. It made me realize I can still do something. I can still testify. Thank you, Mr. Chen. Thank you for your courage." We talked for another 20 minutes. By the end, I had his contact information and a promise that he'd speak with the prosecutor handling the remaining civil cases against Ruth's estate. Another piece of justice falling into place. At 6:45, I drove to the Tempe Public Library for the support group meeting. 12 people attended that night, 8 regulars and 4 new members, all victims of family financial abuse. I stood before them and began the way I always did. "My name is Margaret Bennett. I'm 79 years old. 5 years ago, my family stole $67,000 from me over 4 years. They manipulated my daughter, exploited my grief, and nearly destroyed my life. But I fought back. I documented everything. I went to the police, and I won. If you're here tonight, it means you've recognized that what's happening to you isn't love, it's abuse. That's the hardest step. Everything after this gets easier, I promise. Because you're not alone anymore. We're going to help you fight back. And you're going to win. The meeting lasted 2 hours. By the end, all 4 new members had action plans. They had resources, they had support, they had hope. After everyone left, Linda Martinez and I stacked chairs in comfortable silence. "You're good at this," she said, "helping people. Have you ever thought about making it official, getting certified as a victim advocate?" "I'm 79 years old, Linda. Isn't that too old to start a new career?" "Margaret, you wrote a best-selling book at 77. You rebuilt your entire life at 74. Age is just a number for you." I laughed. She was right. The Margaret who'd counted pennies to buy a cherry tart 5 years ago would never have imagined writing a book, speaking at conferences, or helping dozens of other victims find their way to justice. But that Margaret was gone. The new Margaret, the one who'd survived Ruth Patterson and come out stronger, she could do anything. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I hadn't heard from in 5 years, but still had saved. "Jessica, Mom, I know you said to ask in 5 years. It's been 5 years and 2 days. I've spent every one of those days trying to become someone worthy of being your daughter. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know that might never come. But I'm asking for a chance. Can we have coffee? Just 30 minutes. If you say no, I'll understand, and I won't ask again. I love you. Jessica." I stared at the message for a long moment. 5 years ago, I'd told Jessica to ask me again after she'd proven through actions, not words, that she'd changed. Had she? I didn't know. We'd had minimal contact, Christmas cards, brief emails on birthdays, nothing substantial. She'd been rebuilding her life in Flagstaff while I'd been rebuilding mine in Phoenix. But she'd done the work. I knew that much. She'd completed years of therapy. She'd repaid $32,000, her share of the money stolen from me through monthly payments from her teacher's salary, never missing a single one. She'd testified at every civil case hearing, helping other victims recover their money from Ruth's assets. She'd kept her word about the actions. Did that earn her a second chance? I thought about Emma, who called me Grandma Maggie despite no blood relation. I thought about Carlos, who'd risked his job to help a stranger. I thought about all the people in the support group who'd found courage through my story. I thought about forgiveness not as absolution, but as release. Release from the bitterness that could poison the good life I'd built. I typed back, "Saturday, 10 a.m., Lux Coffee on Mill Avenue, 30 minutes. Her response came immediately. "Thank you, Mom. Thank you for giving me a chance. I won't waste it." I put my phone away and looked up at the desert stars, bright and infinite above the city lights. Richard's ring was no longer on my finger. I'd finally been able to remove it 2 years ago, placing it in a memory box with his photo and our wedding album. I'd let go, not of the love, but of the pain. I did okay, didn't I? I whispered to him, to the stars, to the universe. I survived. I fought back, and I'm helping others do the same. The desert wind whispered back, warm and gentle, and I knew with bone-deep certainty that I'd finally found what Ruth Patterson had tried to steal from me: peace, purpose, and the unshakable knowledge that I was stronger than anyone, including myself, had ever imagined. My name is Margaret Louise Bennett. I'm 79 years old, and my story isn't about what was taken from me. It's about everything I took back. Saturday morning arrived with that crisp Arizona winter air that makes Phoenix livable. 62 degrees, clear skies, the kind of day that tourists pay thousands of dollars to experience. I dressed carefully in a cream-colored blouse and navy slacks, applied minimal makeup, and stared at myself in the bathroom mirror. 79 years old, the face looking back at me was lined with years and experience, but the eyes were clearer than they'd been in decades. No fear. No desperation, just steady resolve. I was meeting my daughter for coffee, the daughter who'd lied to me for 4 years, the daughter who'd been manipulated since age 8, the daughter who'd spent 5 years trying to earn back something she'd destroyed. The drive to Lux Coffee took 17 minutes. I arrived 10 minutes early and chose a table by the window with a clear view of the parking lot. I ordered chamomile tea. My stomach couldn't handle coffee anymore and waited. At 9:58, a car pulled into the lot. Jessica got out, and I barely recognized her. The woman walking toward the coffee shop wasn't the 32-year-old who'd sat in my studio apartment 5 years ago, broken and ashamed. This was a 37-year-old woman who'd clearly done the work of rebuilding herself. Her hair was shorter, natural instead of highlighted. She wore simple jeans and a flannel shirt, teacher practical. No designer accessories, no expensive jewelry. She looked like me at that age. Like the woman I'd been before Ruth Patterson entered our lives. Jessica saw me through the window and paused, taking a visible breath before entering. She ordered at the counter black coffee, no additions, and approached my table with the careful steps of someone walking on eggshells. "Mom." She sat down across from me. "Thank you for coming." 30 minutes, I said. "That's what I promised." 30 minutes. She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup like it was a lifeline. "I've been planning what to say for 5 years, and now that I'm here, it all feels inadequate." "Then don't say what you planned. Say what's true." Jessica nodded slowly. "Okay. Truth." She looked me directly in the eye, something she hadn't been able to do 5 years ago. "I'm not going to apologize again. I've said I'm sorry 1,000 times, and words are cheap. So instead, I want to tell you what I've done." "I'm listening." After the trial, I moved to Flagstaff because I couldn't stay in Phoenix. Every corner reminded me of Marcus, of the lies, of what I'd done to you. I got a job teaching 4th grade at Gilbert Elementary. I live in a studio apartment smaller than yours was because I wanted to understand what I'd forced you to live in while I ate expensive dinners. She took a sip of coffee, her hands still trembling slightly. "I've been in therapy every week for 5 years, Doctor. Patricia Morrison, yes, the same judge who presided over Ruth's trial. She retired and became a therapist specializing in family trauma. She's helped me understand how I was groomed, but also how I made conscious choices that hurt you." "Both things are true." "They are," I agreed. "I paid back $32,000. Every month. $600 from my teacher's salary. It took almost 5 years. The last payment cleared 3 days ago." "I know. I received confirmation from Mr. Weber. That money. Mom, I need you to understand, I didn't pay it back to erase what I did. I paid it back because it was yours and I stole it, and theft requires restitution. Even if you never speak to me again after today, that money was still yours." "What else?" "I changed my name. Legally. I'm no longer Jessica Bennett Patterson. I'm Jessica Morgan now, Mom's maiden name. I wanted to honor the grandmother I never got to meet, and I wanted to completely separate myself from Marcus and his family. That surprised me. A legal name change was expensive and complicated. She'd erased Marcus from her identity entirely. I've testified in 7 civil cases against Ruth's estate. Every victim who filed suit, I showed up and told my story. I helped them get their money back. It was the least I could do. I know. Detective O'Connor kept me informed. And Jessica's voice broke. I started a program at my school. Financial literacy for kids, starting in 3rd grade. Teaching them about manipulation, about how even people who say they love you can hurt you, about recognizing abuse. I call it the Margaret Bennett Financial Safety Program. My breath caught. "You named it after me?" "I asked permission from the school board to use your name. They said, yes, your book is required reading for all our teachers now, so they know the warning signs of kids whose families might be experiencing financial abuse." "Mom, I've identified 4 students in 5 years whose grandparents were being exploited by family members, 4 kids who I was able to help because I knew what to look for because I'd been the exploiter." Tears were running down her face now, but she didn't wipe them away. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking you to forget what I did. I'm asking if you can see that I'm different now, that I've taken the worst thing I've ever done and tried to turn it into something that helps other people." I was quiet for a long moment, studying my daughter's face. The shame was still there, would probably always be there. But there was also strength, purpose. The kind of resolve that comes from walking through fire and emerging, changed. "Tell me about the 4 students," I said. Jessica blinked, surprised. "What?" "The 4 students whose grandparents you helped. Tell me their stories." So she did. For the next 20 minutes, well past our agreed 30, Jessica told me about Miguel, whose uncle was stealing his grandmother's Social Security checks. About Sophia, whose parents were draining her grandfather's veterans' benefits. About twins Jaden and Jordan, whose aunt had manipulated their grandmother into signing over her house. And about 10-year-old Alyssa, whose mother's boyfriend was exactly like Marcus, charming, manipulative, positioning himself to exploit Alyssa's widowed grandmother. I saw the signs, Jessica said. The expensive purchases, the manufactured emergencies, the grandmother getting thinner and more stressed, while the boyfriend got new clothes and a new car. I called Adult Protective Services. I worked with the school counselor. We documented everything. What happened? The boyfriend was arrested. He'd stolen $43,000. The grandmother is getting counseling now, and Alyssa's mother left him. It's not a happy ending. The family is still broken, still healing. But they're safe, and they're getting their money back. You saved them. I tried to undo what I did to you by stopping it from happening to someone else. But Mom, saving 4 families doesn't erase hurting you. It doesn't balance the scales. It just means I'm trying to be better than I was. I took a sip of my tea, letting her words settle. Jessica, can I ask you something? Anything. Do you still have feelings for Marcus? She was quiet for a long time. I visited him once. 2 years ago, at the prison. I needed to look him in the eye and ask him if any of it was real. What did he say? He said he didn't know anymore, that he'd started as an assignment, but somewhere along the way he'd stopped acting. He said he thinks he loved me, but he's not sure if it was real love or just what he'd been trained to feel. And Mom? That answer was worse than if he'd just said no. Because at least a clear no would have been truth. His uncertainty meant our entire relationship exists in this gray space where I'll never know what was real. Have you seen him since? No. I signed the divorce papers through lawyers. He sends me letters from prison, sometimes apologizing, updating me on his life, telling me he hopes I'm okay. I don't respond. What would I say? Thanks for destroying my ability to trust anyone? Have you dated? Tried to meet someone new? Jessica laughed bitterly. How? How do I trust that someone likes me for me and not for what they can get? How do I trust my own feelings when I couldn't tell the difference between love and manipulation in my own marriage? I'm 37, divorced, teaching elementary school in Flagstaff. I'm not exactly a catch, and even if someone was interested, I'd spend the whole time wondering what their angle was. That's what Ruth took from you. Not just 4 years of your life, but your ability to believe in connection. Yes. Jessica wiped her eyes. That's exactly what she took, and I don't know how to get it back. I reached across the table and took my daughter's hand. She startled at the contact. It was the first time I'd willingly touched her in 5 years. You get it back slowly, I said. The same way I did. You build connections with people who have no agenda. You volunteer, you help others. You create relationships based on giving, not taking. And gradually, you remember what real connection feels like. Did you? Did you remember? Yes, Carlos and Maria became true friends. Linda Martinez, the victim advocate, the people in the support group, my sister Diana and her family. Little Emma calls me Grandma Maggie. I've rebuilt a family from people who choose to love me, not people who feel obligated to. Am I part of that family? Her voice was barely a whisper. After everything I've done, is there a place for me? I looked at my daughter, this woman who'd betrayed me, who'd been victimized herself, who'd spent 5 years trying to become someone worthy of redemption. I don't know yet, I said honestly, but Jessica, I'm willing to find out. Not today, not all at once, but slowly. Coffee once a month, phone calls on birthdays, emails about the students you're helping. We rebuild trust the same way it was destroyed, one small action at a time. Once a month, Jessica repeated, hope and fear warring on her face. I can do that. Mom, I swear I won't waste this chance. You already haven't wasted it. The program you started, the students you've helped, the work you've done on yourself, Jessica, that's not wasting a chance. That's redemption. Do you forgive me? I'm working on it. Forgiveness isn't a switch you flip, it's a process. Some days I wake up angry about what you did. Some days I feel sad about the years we lost. But some days I wake up thinking about those 4 students you helped, and I feel proud. Not of what you did to me, but of what you've done since. Proud? Jessica's voice broke completely. You're proud of me? I'm proud that you didn't let Ruth win. She tried to turn you into someone like her, a manipulator, a user, someone who saw people as resources. But you fought back. You became a protector instead of a predator. Yes, Jessica, I'm proud of that. My daughter sobbed openly now, her shoulders shaking. Other coffee shop patrons glanced over, but I didn't care. This was grief. Grief for what had been lost, relief for what might be rebuilt. "Thank you," she whispered when she could speak. "Thank you for giving me a chance I don't deserve." "Everyone deserves a chance to be better than their worst moment," I said. Ruth taught us both that families can hurt us. Now we're both learning that families can also heal us if we're brave enough to try. We sat in that coffee shop for another hour, well past our 30 minutes. We talked about her students, about my book, about the support group, about anything and everything except Marcus and Ruth and the 4 years of lies. When we finally stood to leave, Jessica hesitated. "Can I hug you?" I opened my arms. She fell into them, this daughter who'd been 8 when her father died, who'd been groomed for 14 years, who'd hurt me so deeply, and who was trying so hard to heal. "I love you, Mom," she whispered into my shoulder. "I love you too, baby," I whispered back. "We're going to be okay. Not today, but someday." "Someday," she agreed. As I drove home to my house in Gilbert, I thought about redemption and second chances, about how Ruth had tried to destroy my family but had ultimately created something stronger, a daughter who understood the cost of betrayal and would spend her life making sure others didn't pay it. Jessica texted me that evening, "Same time next month?" I replied, "Yes. And Jessica, tell me more about Alyssa next time. I think I might have some resources that could help her grandmother." "I will. Love you, Mom." "Love you too." I set down my phone and smiled. The coffee meeting had lasted 90 minutes, not 30. But it was a start. And sometimes, a start is everything. 3 weeks after my coffee meeting with Jessica, a letter arrived in my mailbox that made my blood run cold. The return address was Arizona State Prison Complex, Perryville, Women's Unit. The name above it, Ruth Sarah Patterson, inmate number 847,392. I stood in my driveway holding that envelope like it was a live grenade. The protective order had expired after Ruth's conviction. She'd been sentenced, appeals exhausted, case closed. Legally, she could write to me now. But that didn't mean I had to read it. I should have thrown it away, should have burned it without opening it. But I didn't. I took it inside, made myself a cup of tea, and sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd compiled evidence against her 5 years ago, the same table where Rachel Moore had documented her own exploitation 3 weeks ago. My hands shook as I opened the envelope. Inside were 3 pages, handwritten in Ruth's elegant script, the same handwriting I'd seen on those Instagram posts from July 2003, the same loops and flourishes that had captioned photos of my husband's stolen ring. "Dear Margaret, I know you must be surprised to receive this letter. Perhaps angry, perhaps frightened. I don't blame you for any of those reactions. After all, I've spent the last 5 years in prison because of you. Already the manipulation was beginning. Because of you, as if I'd committed the crimes, not her. But I'm not writing to threaten you or curse you or even to protest my innocence. I'm writing because I'm dying, and there are things you deserve to know before I'm gone." Dying. My first instinct was to doubt Ruth had faked medical emergencies for 30 years. But I kept reading. "The doctors say I have stage 4 pancreatic cancer. 6 months, maybe less. I've declined treatment because what's the point? I'm 69 years old, serving a 45-year sentence. I was going to die in here anyway. Cancer just speeds up the timeline. You won, Margaret. You got your justice. I'll die in a cell, hated and alone, while you live in freedom with your family and your book deals and your reputation as a victim-turned-hero. You've turned your suffering into profit. I can't even be angry about it. It's brilliant, really. You learned from the best." The audacity of that line, "you learned from the best," as if I'd learned manipulation techniques from her rather than learned to recognize and resist them. But here's what I need you to understand before I die. I loved Richard. I didn't exploit him. I loved him genuinely, deeply, in a way you never did. My hands clenched around the paper, crinkling the edges. You were his wife, yes. You gave him 35 years. But Margaret, were they good years? Did you see him? Really see him? Did you understand the man he was underneath the husband and father roles? I did. In 6 weeks, I understood Richard Bennett better than you did in 35 years. I knew his fears, not the surface ones about dying, but the deep ones about wasting his life, about never being truly known. I knew his regrets about paths not taken, dreams not pursued, the person he might have been if he'd married someone who challenged him instead of someone who managed him. The word managed was underlined twice. He gave me his wedding ring, Margaret, not because I manipulated him, but because he wanted me to have it. Because in those final weeks I represented something you never could possibility. The woman who saw him as Richard, not as Margaret's husband or Jessica's father or the electric company employee. And yes, I kept the ring. For 22 years I kept it. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder of the only pure love I ever experienced. The only man who saw me for who I truly was and loved me anyway. I had to put the letter down. My heart was racing, my breath coming in short gasps. This was what Ruth did. She took truth and twisted it, took love and corrupted it, took grief and weaponized it. But I forced myself to keep reading. I know what you're thinking, that I'm delusional, that Richard was confused and dying and I took advantage. That's the story you've told yourself, the story you've sold to the media and the courts and your readers, and maybe you even believe it. But Margaret, I have something you don't have. I have Richard's letters. My stomach dropped. Yes, letters. 6 of them, written in his own hand during his final weeks. Letters he gave to me, asking me to keep them private, to never show them to you or Jessica. Letters where he wrote about his life, his marriage, his feelings about dying. Letters where he wrote about me. I've kept them hidden for 22 years. The police never found them when they searched my house because they weren't there. They're in a safety deposit box in Scottsdale, in a bank you've never heard of, under a name you don't know. And I'm going to give them to Jessica. The words hit me like a physical blow. Not to you, Margaret. You've had your victory. You've destroyed my life, taken my freedom, turned my son against me. You've won every battle. But the war? The war for the truth about who Richard really was and what he really felt? That war isn't over. If this part touched something deep inside you, hit that like button so I know it reached you. Do you see your own reflection in this character's journey? Tell me in the comments. Your story might just inspire someone else. I'm leaving those letters to Jessica in my will. When I die, and I will die soon, they'll be delivered to her with instructions to read them alone without you present. And then your daughter will know the truth. That her father wasn't the saint you've made him out to be. That he was capable of love outside his marriage. That maybe, just maybe, you weren't the perfect wife you claimed to have been. I'm not doing this to hurt you, Margaret. I'm doing this because Richard's truth deserves to be told. Because for 22 years, you've controlled the narrative. You've made him into a victim, me into a villain, and yourself into a martyr. But what if the real story is more complicated? What if Richard was trapped in a marriage that had lost its spark? What if I gave him something in his final weeks that you couldn't? Genuine connection, understanding, the freedom to be fully himself. Jessica will read those letters. She'll see her father's words in his own handwriting. And she'll have to decide for herself what's true. You can't stop this, Margaret. The safety deposit box has explicit instructions that only Jessica can access it after my death, using a key that will be mailed to her along with this letter I've written to her. You won't even know which bank until it's too late. So enjoy your victory, enjoy your book sales and your speaking fees and your reputation as the brave survivor, but know that I've left you a gift, doubt. The gift of never being completely sure what your husband really felt, what he really wanted, who he really loved in his final days. You took my freedom. I'm taking your certainty. Goodbye, Margaret. I hope the not knowing haunts you as much as prison has haunted me. Ruth. I sat at my kitchen table staring at that letter until the sun set and the room grew dark around me. 6 letters, Richard's letters, potentially revealing. What? Affairs of the heart? Regrets about our marriage? Love for Ruth? Or were they just the confused ramblings of a dying man, pumped full of morphine, writing to a caregiver who'd manipulated him into believing she understood him? I'd never know until Jessica received them. If they even existed. Because this could be Ruth's final manipulation, making me doubt Richard, doubt our marriage, doubt everything I knew to be true, creating uncertainty where there had been peace, planting seeds of suspicion that would grow and fester even after she was gone. That was Ruth's greatest talent, corruption, not just of finances but of memories, relationships, truth itself. My phone rang. Jessica's name on the screen. Mom? Her voice was shaky. I just got a weird letter in the mail. From Ruth. She says she's dying and she has letters from Dad and she's leaving them to me and Mom. What do I do? So Ruth had sent us both letters. Of course she had. Maximum psychological damage. Jessica, come to my house. Right now. We need to talk about this together. I'm in Flagstaff. It'll take 3 hours. Then drive carefully, and I'll see you in 3 hours. Don't read Ruth's letter again until we can discuss it together. Mom, what if the letters are real? What if Dad really did write to her? What if— 3 hours, Jessica, we'll figure this out together. After I hung up, I called Mr. Weber. Mrs. Bennett, I'm glad you called. Ruth Patterson's attorney contacted me this afternoon. She's filed an addendum to her will specifically naming Jessica as recipient of certain personal effects. Letters. She claims she has letters from Richard. You know about them? She sent me a letter explaining her plan. Is this legal? Can she do this? Unfortunately, yes. She can leave anything she wants to anyone she wants, as long as it doesn't violate the terms of her sentence. Personal correspondence, even from a deceased person, is considered her property to distribute as she sees fit. Even if those letters might be forgeries, even if this is just a final attempt to hurt us, we can contest authenticity when they're delivered. Handwriting analysis, paper dating, all of that. But Mrs. Bennett, you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that the letters are real. And if they are? If Richard really did write love letters to his nurse while I was home taking care of our daughter? Mr. Weber was quiet for a moment. Then you'll deal with it the same way you've dealt with everything else Ruth has thrown at you, with strength, with dignity, and with the support of people who love you. You survived her criminal conspiracy. You'll survive this too. But as I hung up the phone and sat in my darkening kitchen, I wasn't sure. Because this wasn't about money. This wasn't about justice. This was about the man I'd loved for 35 years, the marriage I'd thought was solid, the memories I'd cherished for 22 years since his death. Ruth had already stolen so much from me. My savings, my peace of mind, my daughter's innocence, 4 years of my life. Now she was reaching from her prison cell to steal Richard too. To taint every memory, cast doubt on every year of our marriage, make me question whether anything I'd believed about our love was true. And the cruelest part, I wouldn't even know if she'd succeeded until she was dead and those letters, real or fabricated, were delivered to Jessica. 6 months, Ruth had said. Maybe less. 6 months of waiting, wondering, doubting. 6 months of Ruth's final torture. I looked at my phone and made a decision. I opened my contacts and found the number for Dr. Patricia Morrison, the retired judge turned therapist who'd been helping Jessica. Dr. Morrison, this is Margaret Bennett. I need to schedule an emergency session for both Jessica and me together. Ruth Patterson has sent letters claiming she has correspondence from my late husband. I need help preparing for what might be in them. I can see you both Monday afternoon, 2 p.m. Margaret, whatever those letters say, if they even exist, remember, you know your marriage. Ruth knows only what she observed in 6 weeks of a 35-year relationship. Don't let her steal your memories. But after we hung up, I looked around my kitchen at the house I'd bought with recovered funds, at the life I'd rebuilt, at the peace I'd finally found, and I felt it all cracking. Because Ruth was right about one thing, not knowing would haunt me. And that doubt, that uncertainty, that was Ruth's final victory. Even from a prison cell, even dying of cancer, even after losing everything, she'd found one more way to hurt me. And I had no choice but to wait for the blow to fall. Jessica arrived at my house at 11:17 p.m., 3 hours and 12 minutes after I'd called her. I'd left every light on, unable to sit in darkness while waiting, unable to do anything but pace and think and spiral into worst-case scenarios. She looked terrible when she walked through my door, hair unwashed, eyes red-rimmed, wearing sweatpants and a Flagstaff high school hoodie that had seen better days. She was carrying Ruth's letter clutched in one hand like it might bite her. Mom. She fell into my arms, and we stood there in my entryway, 2 women bound by blood and betrayal, and now by Ruth's final act of cruelty. Come sit down, I said, guiding her to my couch. Have you eaten? I can't eat. Mom, what if Dad really loved her? What if our entire family was a lie? What if— Stop. I took both her hands in mine. We don't know anything yet. Ruth could be lying. The letters might not even exist. But what if they do? Jessica's voice broke. What if I read them and find out Dad wanted to leave us? What if he was planning to divorce you and be with Ruth, and then he died before he could do it? Richard was dying, Jessica. He had 6 weeks to live when he met Ruth. He wasn't planning anything except how to say goodbye. But what if he fell in love with her in those 6 weeks? What if she made him happier than you ever did? Mom, what if Ruth was telling the truth about Dad loving her? I pulled Jessica close, letting her cry into my shoulder. Then we'll deal with it together. But Jessica, I need you to listen to me. I was married to your father for 35 years. I knew him when he was 23 and cocky and convinced he could change the world. I knew him when you were born and he cried from joy. I knew him through promotions and disappointments and Sunday mornings and Tuesday nights and every ordinary moment in between. But, let me finish. Ruth knew him for 6 weeks while he was pumped full of morphine and facing death. She knew him scared and vulnerable and not in his right mind. Even if he wrote things to her, even if he expressed feelings or doubts or confusion, that doesn't erase 35 years of real lived love. Jessica pulled back, wiping her eyes. How can you be so calm? Aren't you terrified of what those letters might say? I'm not calm. I'm devastated. But Jessica, I've learned something in the past 5 years. Ruth Patterson is a master at manipulation. She manipulates money, relationships, and truth itself. This letter? I held up the one she'd sent me. This is her final manipulation. She wants us to torture ourselves for 6 months wondering what's in those letters. She wants us to doubt everything we know about Dad. She wants us to suffer. So what do? We refuse to play her game. Jessica blinked. What? We refuse to suffer. We refuse to doubt. We refuse to let Ruth poison our memories of your father from beyond the grave or almost beyond it. I stood up, decision crystallizing. We're going to prepare for the worst, hope for the best, and remember that we know the truth about who Richard was. But how do we prepare for letters we haven't read yet? By remembering. Come with me. I led Jessica to my bedroom and opened my closet. On the top shelf was a large cardboard box, one I hadn't opened in years. I pulled it down and carried it back to the living room. What is this? Your father's memory box. Everything I saved from our marriage. I opened it carefully, revealing layers of history. Love letters he wrote me when we were dating. Cards from anniversaries. Photos from every year together. His journal from when you were born. Every tangible piece of evidence that our marriage was real and loving and true. Jessica reached in with trembling hands and pulled out a stack of envelopes, yellowed with age. These are from when you two were first dating? Read the top one. She opened it carefully. Inside was a letter in Richard's handwriting, younger, less refined than it would become, but unmistakably his. My dearest Maggie, I know we've only been dating for 3 months, but I have to tell you I'm going to marry you someday. I know it with a certainty that scares and thrills me. You're unlike anyone I've ever met. Smart, funny, kind, and you see me. Not the person I pretend to be, but who I actually am, and you love me anyway. I can't promise I'll always be perfect. I can't promise we won't fight or struggle or have hard times, but I can promise I'll love you every single day, in the big moments and the small ones, until the day I die. Forever yours, Richard. Jessica read it twice, tears streaming down her face. He wrote this when he was 23? Yes, and he kept his promise. He loved me every single day for 35 years. But what if Ruth made him question that? What if in those final weeks, then we'll know he was confused and dying and manipulated. I pulled out more items from the box. Here, his journal from the week you were born. Read the entry from August 14th, 1987. Jessica opened the worn notebook to the marked page. Jessica Margaret Bennett was born today at 3:47 a.m., 7 pounds 6 ounces. She has Maggie's eyes and my stubbornness. When the nurse placed her in my arms, I looked at Maggie, exhausted, beautiful, having just done the hardest work in the world, and I felt complete. This is what life is about. Not promotions or possessions or achievements. This moment, this family, this love. I promise you, Jessica, I'll be the best father I can be. And Maggie, I'll spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you. He wrote that the day I was born, Jessica's voice was barely a whisper. Yes. That's who your father was. That's the man Ruth claims loved her after 35 years of loving us. Does that sound like a man who was planning to leave his family? No. It doesn't. We spent the next 2 hours going through the memory box, card after card, letter after letter, photo after photo, Richard at our wedding, looking at me like I was the only person in the world. Richard holding newborn Jessica, wonder on his face. Richard at my 40th birthday party, his arm around my shoulders, both of us laughing at something Diana had said. Evidence. Decades of evidence that our marriage had been real and true and loving. "Mom," Jessica said finally, exhausted from crying and remembering, "what do we do when those letters arrive? Do we read them?" "I'd been thinking about this all evening." "That's up to you. They're being sent to you, not me. You get to decide. But they're about you. About your marriage. Don't you want to know what they say?" "Want to know?" "No. I've spent 5 years healing from what Ruth did to our family. I don't need to know what lies she convinced your father to write while he was dying. But Jessica, if you need to read them, if you need to know for your own peace of mind, then I'll support that decision. And if they're terrible, if they say Dad loved Ruth, then we'll remember these." I gestured to the memory box contents spread across my living room. "We'll remember 35 years of truth versus 6 weeks of confusion. We'll remember that dying people sometimes say things they don't mean, feel things that aren't real, get confused about what they want. Dr. Morrison said something similar when I called her on the drive here. She said morphine can cause hallucinations, false memories, emotional confusion. That what Dad might have written doesn't necessarily reflect what he truly felt. She's right. Ruth preyed on vulnerable, dying patients. That's what she did. She exploited their confusion and called it love. Jessica was quiet for a long time, staring at the contents of the memory box. Finally, "I don't want to read them." "What?" "The letters. When they come, I don't want to read them." She looked at me with determination I hadn't seen in years. "Ruth wants us to read them. She wants us to doubt Dad, to poison our memories, to torture ourselves. She spent her whole life manipulating people, and these letters, real or fake, are her final manipulation." "Jessica." "No, Mom. Listen. For 5 years I've let Ruth control my life. She controlled it when I was married to Marcus, lying to you on her orders. She controlled it during the trial when I had to testify about what she'd done. She controlled it during therapy when I had to process all the ways she'd groomed and used me. I'm done letting her control anything. So you're just not going to read them?" "I'm going to refuse her final gift of doubt. I know who Dad was. I have my own memories, good ones, real ones, and I have this box full of evidence that he loved you and loved me for his entire adult life. 6 letters written during 6 weeks of morphine-induced confusion don't change 35 years of truth." I felt something loosening in my chest tension I hadn't realized I'd been carrying since Ruth's letter arrived. "Are you sure?" "Jessica, once they arrive, once they're in your possession, I'll burn them." Her voice was steady, unopened. "I'll burn them without reading them, and I'll never know what Ruth wanted me to believe about Dad, because the not knowing is better than letting her win." "She'll win either way," I said quietly. "If you read them, she poisons your memories. If you don't read them, you'll always wonder what was in them." "Maybe. But wondering what's in letters I chose not to read is different from knowing what lies Ruth convinced Dad to write. One gives me control, the other gives her control." Jessica took my hands. "Mom, Ruth has taken enough from us. She doesn't get Dad too. She doesn't get to rewrite our history. She doesn't get to turn our grief into doubt. What if they're not lies? What if Dad really did love her?" Then he was wrong. The words came out fierce, final. He was confused and dying and manipulated, and he was wrong. Because love isn't 6 weeks of intensity, it's 35 years of showing up. It's staying when things are hard. It's raising a daughter together. It's Sunday morning pancakes and Tuesday night TV, and all the boring, ordinary moments that make a life. Ruth would say those boring moments weren't real love. Ruth is a predator who convinced dying men that drama and intensity and stolen moments were more real than decades of commitment. But Mom, she's wrong. The boring moments are the real ones. The ordinary days are what matter, and Dad lived 35 years of ordinary days with you before Ruth showed up in his final 6 weeks. I started crying then, not from grief or doubt, but from relief. My daughter, who'd been so lost for so long, had finally found clarity. "You're sure about this?" I asked. "About burning the letters?" "I'm sure. And Mom, when they arrive, I want you there with me. I want us to burn them together. We'll have a ceremony, us, and Aunt Diana and Carlos and Maria and everyone who actually loves us. We'll burn Ruth's final manipulation and we'll toast Dad's memory with the truth. that he was a good man who loved his family, even if he got confused at the very end. Dr. Morrison should be there too, I said, to help us process whatever we feel afterward. Agreed. We'll make it meaningful, not bitter or angry, just final, the end of Ruth's power over us. We sat together on my couch, surrounded by evidence of Richard's love, and for the first time since Ruth's letter arrived, I felt hope. Ruth is dying, Jessica said quietly. In 6 months or less, she'll be gone. Really gone. And Mom, we'll still be here. We'll still have each other. We'll still have Dad's real memory, not the twisted version she tried to create. Yes, I agreed. We will. So we wait. We prepare. And when those letters arrive, we destroy them without giving Ruth what she wants. What does she want? Our pain, our doubt, our suffering. But Mom, we're done giving Ruth anything. She's taken enough. Jessica stayed that night, sleeping in my guest room. Before she went to bed, she texted Dr. Morrison, "When Ruth's letters arrive, I'm burning them unread. Can you help me plan a healthy closure ceremony?" The response came quickly. Yes, that's one of the healthiest responses to manipulation I've seen. I'm proud of you, Jessica. Your mother would be too. As I lay in bed that night, Richard's ring, which I'd taken out of the memory box resting on my nightstand, I thought about Ruth's final manipulation. She'd wanted to hurt us, to make us doubt, to steal peace even from her prison cell. But she'd underestimated us. She'd underestimated Jessica's growth and strength. She'd underestimated the power of 35 years of real love to withstand 6 weeks of manufactured drama. Ruth Patterson was dying, and her power over us was dying with her. In 6 months, she'd be gone. And we'd still be here. 4 months after Ruth's letters arrived, both the one to me and the one to Jessica, we received word from the Arizona Department of Corrections. Ruth Sarah Patterson, inmate number 847,392, had died at 3:42 a.m. on May 17th at the prison medical facility. Cause of death: complications from pancreatic cancer. She was 69 years old. The notification came via certified mail, along with information about claiming her remains. No one did. She was cremated at state expense and interred in the prison cemetery, and a second letter from her attorney regarding the safety deposit box. I called Jessica immediately. "She's gone," I said when she answered. Jessica was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I don't know what I'm supposed to feel. Relief? Sadness? Nothing? Whatever you feel is valid. I feel tired, Mom. Just tired. Like I've been holding my breath for 4 months waiting for this, and now I can finally exhale. The attorney says the letters will be delivered within 10 days. Are you still sure about your decision?" More sure than ever. Mom, Ruth's last words to us were manipulation and lies. I won't let her last legacy be doubt. We burn them. We'd been planning the ceremony for weeks with Dr. Morrison's guidance. Not a celebration of Ruth's death that would have given her too much importance, but a ritual of closure, a way to mark the end of her influence over our lives. Dr. Morrison had explained it in our last session. Burning the letters unread is a powerful act of agency. Ruth wanted to control your narrative even after death. By refusing to engage with her final manipulation, you're reclaiming that narrative. You're saying our truth matters more than your lies. The ceremony was scheduled for Saturday, May 25th, 8 days after Ruth's death. We chose my backyard, the small patio behind my house in Gilbert, surrounded by desert landscaping and the privacy of my fence. The guest list was small but meaningful. Jessica, of course. My sister Diana, who'd flown in from Chicago. Carlos and Maria Rodriguez, the couple who'd saved me by having courage to speak up. Linda Martinez, the victim advocate who'd sat beside me through my police statement. Detective Sarah O'Connor, who'd believed me when others might not have. Mr. Weber, the attorney who'd fought for justice. Dr. Patricia Morrison, who'd helped both Jessica and me heal. And little Emma, Diana's granddaughter, now 6 years old, who didn't fully understand what we were doing, but who'd insisted on being there because Grandma Maggie needs her family. On Friday afternoon, the package arrived via registered mail. A legal-sized envelope, thick with contents, addressed to Jessica Morgan. She'd legally changed her name, erasing Patterson entirely. Jessica held the envelope without opening it. "It's heavier than I expected." 6 letters, I said. That's what Ruth claimed. plus whatever instructions or context she included to maximize the damage. Jessica set the envelope down on my kitchen table like it might explode. Tomorrow. We'll deal with it tomorrow. That night, neither of us slept well. I heard Jessica moving around the guest room at 2 a.m, heard her crying softly at 3 a.m. I wanted to go to her, but Dr. Morrison had said this was part of the process, the grief of what might have been in those letters, mixed with the strength of choosing not to know. Saturday morning dawned clear and beautiful, 78 degrees, light breeze, the kind of Arizona spring day that makes you remember why people move here. Our guests began arriving at 9 a.m. Carlos and Maria brought homemade tamales for afterward, Maria said. You'll need real food, not sadness food. Diana brought flowers not for Ruth, but for Richard, to remember the real man, not the confused one Ruth tried to create. Detective O'Connor brought something unexpected, a folder containing 3 letters from other families Ruth had victimized, all expressing gratitude that we'd stopped her. These families wanted you to know, she said, handing them to me, that your courage to prosecute gave them courage to come forward for the civil cases. You didn't just save yourself, you saved them too. I read the letters aloud to everyone gathered on my patio. 3 families, 3 sets of victims, all echoing the same message. Thank you for stopping her. By the time I finished reading, I was crying, but they were clean tears, healing tears. Mr. Weber brought a legal document. This is the final accounting of funds recovered from Ruth's estate and the Patterson family assets. After all claims and distributions, there's approximately $37,000 remaining. Per the judge's order, it's being divided equally among all victims, including you, Mrs. Bennett. Your share is $11,200. Blood money, Jessica said quietly. No, Dr. Morrison corrected gently. Justice money, restitution, taking back what was stolen. At 10 a.m., with everyone gathered in a circle on my patio, we began. Dr. Morrison spoke first. We're here today not to celebrate death, but to celebrate freedom. Freedom from manipulation, from lies, from the power one person held over this family for 22 years. Margaret, would you like to begin? I stepped forward, holding a box of matches, and spoke words I'd been preparing for days. Ruth Patterson entered my life when my husband was dying. She exploited his vulnerability, stole his final moments, and then spent 2 decades targeting my family. She stole my money, corrupted my daughter, and tried to steal my memories of 35 years of marriage. I paused, looking around at the faces of people who'd helped me survive. But she failed. Yes, she took money, we got some back, and we'll rebuild the rest. Yes, she manipulated Jessica, but Jessica fought back and became someone who protects others now. And yes, she tried to poison my memories of Richard, but that's why we're here. To refuse her final gift of doubt. Jessica stepped forward, holding the unopened envelope. Her hands were steady. This envelope contained 6 letters that Ruth claimed my father wrote to her. Letters, she says, prove he loved her. Letters designed to make us question everything we knew about him and our family. She looked at me, then at Diana, then at the circle of supporters surrounding us. I will never know what's in these letters. Real or fabricated, truth or lies, it doesn't matter. Because I know who my father was, a man who loved his family for 35 years, who raised me with kindness, who showed up every day in big ways and small ways. Jessica's voice grew stronger. 6 weeks of confusion at the end of his life doesn't change that. If these letters say he loved Ruth, he was wrong. If they say he wanted to leave us, he was confused. If they say anything that contradicts 35 years of demonstrated love, then they're lies, whether he wrote them or Ruth forged them. She held up the envelope. So I'm burning these letters without reading them. I'm refusing Ruth's final manipulation. I'm choosing to remember my father as he truly was, not as Ruth wanted me to believe he was. And I support that choice, I added. Because Ruth Patterson doesn't get to define my marriage. Richard and I do. And we had 35 years to define it before she showed up. Dr. Morrison placed a small metal fire pit in the center of our circle. Jessica, whenever you're ready. Jessica looked at the envelope one final time. I saw the moment of doubt cross her face, the natural human curiosity about what secrets it contained. But then she looked at me, and I saw her resolve solidify. I don't need to know, she said firmly. What I need is to be free. She placed the envelope in the fire pit. I handed her the matches. She struck one, watched it flare to life, and dropped it onto the envelope. The paper caught immediately, flames consuming Ruth's handwriting on the outside, then spreading to the contents within. We watched in silence as the envelope burned, as whatever was inside 6 letters or 6 lies or 6 confusions turned to ash. It took 4 minutes for everything to burn completely. 4 minutes to destroy Ruth's final manipulation. 4 minutes to reclaim our narrative. When only ashes remained, Emma stepped forward with a child's solemn gravity. "Can I say something?" "Of course, sweetheart," I said. "My mom says that lady Ruth was very mean and hurt a lot of people. But now she's gone and she can't hurt anyone anymore. And Grandma Maggie is safe, and that's good." She looked around at all of us. "Right? That's good?" "Yes, baby," Diana said, pulling Emma into a hug. "That's very good." Carlos cleared his throat. "I'd like to say something, if I may." We all turned to him. 5 years ago, I was just a cashier at Walmart who saw something wrong and spoke up. I didn't know if anyone would believe me. I didn't know if it would matter. But Mrs. Bennett Margaret, you took the information I gave you and you did something extraordinary. You didn't just save yourself, you exposed a predator who'd been operating for 30 years. He gestured to the ashes in the fire pit. That burning right there? That's not just about letters. That's about refusing to be a victim anymore. That's about taking your power back. And Margaret, Jessica, you've both done that. You've taken your power back. Ruth is dead, and you're both alive and strong and helping other people. That's the real victory. Maria added, "And you have family now. Real family. People who love you without wanting anything except your happiness. That's what matters." We stood there for a long moment, watching smoke rise from the ashes, carrying away the last of Ruth's influence. Then Linda Martinez spoke. "I think we should each share one memory of Margaret or Jessica that has nothing to do with Ruth. Let's fill this space with real memories instead of letting Ruth's shadow linger." So we did. Diana shared stories of me and Richard as newlyweds, young and broke and laughing about everything. Detective O'Connor talked about the day I walked into the police station with my evidence folder, how impressed she'd been with my courage and organization. Mr. Weber recalled my determination during the trial, how I'd never wavered even under brutal cross-examination. Dr. Morrison spoke about Jessica's transformation in therapy, how she'd grown from a broken woman into someone who now protects others. Carlos and Maria remembered teaching Emma and me to make tamales together last Christmas, how we'd laughed when I'd made them too spicy. And Jessica talked about a memory from childhood. A Sunday morning when she was 7, before Richard got sick, when we'd all made pancakes together and Richard had flipped one onto the ceiling by accident and we'd laughed until we cried. "That's who he was," Jessica said. "The man who made us laugh, the man who loved us. That's what I'm choosing to remember." By the time we finished, the ashes had cooled. I scooped them into a container not to keep, but to dispose of properly later. They would not rest in my home. Maria unpacked the tamales, and we ate together on my patio, talking about everything except Ruth, the future, not the past, plans, not regrets, life, not death. As the afternoon wore on and people began to leave, each one hugged both Jessica and me. "You did it," Linda whispered. "You survived her. Both of you." By 4 p.m., only Jessica, Diana, Emma, and I remained. "Mom," Jessica said quietly, "can I ask you something?" "Anything. Do you think Dad would be proud of us? Of how we handled this?" I thought about Richard, the real Richard, not Ruth's fantasy version. The man who'd loved me for 35 years, who'd raised Jessica with gentleness and humor, who'd faced death with as much grace as anyone could. "Yes," I said with certainty. He'd be proud that we protected our memories of him. He'd be proud that we didn't let Ruth win. He'd be proud that we chose love over doubt. "Good," Jessica said. "That's all I needed to know." That night, after everyone had left and Jessica had driven back to Flagstaff, I sat alone on my patio where the ceremony had taken place. The fire pit was cold now, the ashes already disposed of in my outdoor trash bin. Ruth Patterson was dead. Her letters were burned. Her power was gone. And I was still here, 79 years old, surrounded by love, helping other victims, living a life of purpose and meaning. I thought about the woman I'd been 5 years ago, counting pennies for a cherry tart, desperate for family connection, blind to the exploitation happening around me. That woman was gone too. In her place was someone stronger, someone who'd fought back and won, someone who'd turned trauma into purpose and pain into power. My phone buzzed. A text from Jessica. Thank you, Mom. For everything. For believing me when I came to you 5 years ago. For giving me a second chance. For burning those letters with me today. I love you. I texted back. I love you too, baby. We did good today. Dad would be proud. And as the sun set over the Arizona desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that Richard had always loved, I whispered to the evening air, "Goodbye, Ruth. You're finally truly gone. And we're finally truly free." The nightmare that had lasted 22 years was over. The rest of our lives could truly begin. The end. Margaret Bennett's memoir, The Receipt of Truth, How I Exposed a Decades-Long Family Fraud, is available wherever books are sold. A portion of all proceeds goes to the National Center on Elder Abuse and similar organizations protecting vulnerable adults from financial exploitation. The community center in downtown Phoenix was packed on a Tuesday evening in October 2030. 237 people filled the auditorium. Elderly victims of financial abuse, their families, advocates, social workers, and law enforcement officers. They'd all come to hear me speak. I was 84 years old now, 10 years since that morning at Walmart, when Carlos Rodriguez had changed my life with a whispered warning. 10 years since I'd hidden behind a dumpster and discovered the truth. 10 years since my world had shattered, and then slowly, painstakingly, been rebuilt into something stronger. "Good evening," I said into the microphone, my voice steady despite my age. "My name is Margaret Louise Bennett, and I'm here to tell you that it's never too late to fight back." The audience quieted, all eyes on me. 10 years ago, my daughter's in-laws stole $67,000 from me over 4 years. They manufactured emergencies, exploited my grief, and systematically drained my savings while I ate ramen noodles and slept under a leaking ceiling. But more than that, they stole 22 years by targeting my family from the moment my husband died. I paused, letting that sink in. I was 74 years old when I finally discovered the truth. Many people told me I was too old to fight back, too frail to handle the stress of prosecution, too late to recover. They were wrong. A ripple of applause started in the back row and spread forward. Tonight, I want to introduce you to some people who prove that survivors don't just survive, we thrive. I gestured to the front row where 5 people Saturday. This is Rachel Moore. 5 years ago, she came to my house after reading my book. Her brother had stolen $38,000 from her. Today, she's recovered $31,000 through civil court, her brother is in prison, and Rachel runs a support group for financial abuse victims in Tucson. Rachel stood and waved, receiving warm applause. This is Harold Chen. He was Ruth Patterson's first husband, the one who discovered what she was doing in the 90s but felt too guilty to come forward. After my book was published, Harold found the courage to testify in civil cases against Ruth's estate. His testimony helped 6 additional families recover money. He's now 87 years old and volunteers with the Arizona Adult Protective Services as a peer counselor. Harold stood slowly, using a cane, and bowed slightly to acknowledge the applause. This is Maria Santos. 3 years ago, her son and daughter-in-law were draining her retirement account. She documented everything using methods from my book, went to police, and successfully prosecuted. Her family relationships were destroyed, but Maria says, and I quote, "I'd rather be alone and free than surrounded by thieves who smile while robbing me." Maria, a tiny woman in her 70s with fierce eyes, stood and raised a fist in solidarity. The audience cheered. This is Detective James Crawford from the Scottsdale Police Department. After reading about my case, he developed specialized training for law enforcement on recognizing and investigating elder financial abuse. That training has now been implemented in 43 Arizona police departments and has resulted in over 200 arrests. Detective Crawford, a man in his 40s with kind eyes, stood and nodded to the crowd. And finally, this is my daughter, Jessica Morgan. 10 years ago, she was complicit in the fraud against me. She lied to me, stole from me, and broke my heart. But Jessica did something remarkable. She faced what she'd done, made restitution, and spent the last decade becoming someone who protects others instead of hurting them. Jessica stood from the front row. She was 42 now, her face showing the wear of hard-won wisdom. "I run the Margaret Bennett Financial Safety Program in Flagstaff schools," she said. We've taught over 3,000 children to recognize exploitation and advocate for vulnerable family members. We've identified 27 cases of elder financial abuse through student reports. I can't undo what I did to my mother, but I can prevent others from doing it to their families. The applause for Jessica was thunderous. I saw tears in her eyes as she sat back down. These 5 people represent just a fraction of the lives changed by exposing Ruth Patterson's crimes, I continued. But tonight, I want to talk about something more important than Ruth. I want to talk about you. I stepped out from behind the podium, moving to the edge of the stage. My knees ached. Arthritis was my constant companion now, but I wanted to be closer to the audience. If you're here tonight, you're probably experiencing or have experienced financial abuse from family members. You might be questioning whether it's really abuse. You might be making excuses for them. You might be telling yourself that family helps family, that you're being paranoid, that you should be grateful they need you. I saw heads nodding throughout the audience. Stop. Just stop. If family members are taking your money while living better than you do, that's theft. If they manufacture emergencies that require your constant financial rescue, that's manipulation. If they make you feel guilty for questioning their requests, that's emotional abuse. And if they threaten consequences when you say no, whether it's abandonment, exposing secrets, or claiming you're mentally incompetent, that's coercion. My voice grew stronger. You are not crazy. You are not selfish. You are not obligated to fund adult family members' lifestyles at the expense of your own well-being. And it is never, ever too late to stop. A woman in the 3rd row raised her hand. But what if they really need help? What if I'm wrong? Document everything, I said firmly. Keep receipts, track expenditures. Watch for inconsistencies between what they claim they need and how they actually live. If they're genuinely struggling, the evidence will show it. If they're exploiting you, the evidence will show that too. Trust but verify, and if verification reveals lies, stop trusting. Another hand. What if it destroys the family? Then it wasn't really a family, it was an exploitation arrangement disguised as family. Real families don't require you to impoverish yourself to prove your love. Real families don't lie, manipulate, and steal. Real families don't treat you like an ATM with feelings. A man in his 80s stood. Mrs. Bennett, I'm in your situation exactly. My son has taken nearly $100,000 from me over 6 years, but he's my only child. If I report him, I'll lose him forever. How do you live with that? I looked at him with understanding and sadness. Sir, you've already lost him. The person you think he is the son you raised, the child you love, that person isn't who's taking your money. The person taking your money is someone who sees you as a resource, not a parent. Reporting him doesn't destroy your relationship. It reveals that the relationship you thought you had was already gone. He sat down heavily, processing that truth. But here's what I learned, I continued, softening my tone. When you lose family who exploited you, you make room for people who genuinely care. I lost my daughter for 5 years. It was the most painful experience of my life. But during those 5 years, I built relationships with people like Carlos and Maria Rodriguez, who helped me without wanting anything. People like Detective O'Connor, who believed me when others might not have. People like Rachel and Harold and Maria Santos, who understand what I survived because they survived it too. I gestured to the audience. You think prosecuting family will leave you alone, but look around this room. 237 people who understand, who believe you, who will support you. You're not alone unless you choose to stay isolated with people who hurt you. For the next hour, I answered questions, shared strategies, and listened to stories. So many stories, each one a variation on the same theme. Family members exploiting elderly relatives, justifying it with entitlement and excuses, leaving victims confused and impoverished and ashamed. But I also heard hope. People who were documenting, people who were planning to report, people who were ready to fight back. After the event, a line formed of people wanting to talk to me personally. I stayed for 2 hours, speaking with each one, providing resources, offering encouragement. A woman in her 70s approached, trembling. Mrs. Bennett, my daughter has taken everything. My savings, my house, my dignity. I'm 81 years old and living in a shelter. Is it really worth fighting at my age? Or should I just let it go? I took both her hands in mine. Listen to me. You are 81. If you live to 90, that's 9 more years. If you live to 95, that's 14 more years. Do you want to spend those years as a victim? Or do you want to spend them free? Free, she whispered. Then fight. Get a lawyer. Document everything. File charges. Take back your life. Because, ma'am, I fought back at 74, and the past 10 years have been the best years of my life. Not because I'm rich. I'm not. Not because everything is perfect, it's not. But because I'm free, and freedom is worth fighting for at any age. She hugged me, crying into my shoulder. Thank you. Thank you for showing us it's possible. By the time the community center closed at 10 p.m., I was exhausted but fulfilled. Jessica drove me home to my house in Gilbert, the same house I'd bought with recovered funds 10 years ago, now paid off completely, truly mine. Good speech, Mom, Jessica said as we pulled into my driveway. Especially the part about me. I told the truth. You turned your life around. Because you gave me the chance. Not many mothers would. Not many daughters would do the work you did to earn it. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Jessica said, Marcus was denied parole again. His third attempt. The board cited lack of genuine remorse. Marcus, the man who'd married my daughter as an assignment. He'd served 10 years of his 15-year sentence, eligible for parole after 8 with good behavior. But parole required accepting responsibility and showing remorse, and apparently Marcus still couldn't manage that. How do you feel about that? I asked. Relieved, honestly. I've moved on, but I'm not sure I'm ready for him to be free. Maybe in another few years, after more therapy, after more time to heal. But not yet. That's fair. Jessica helped me into my house, made sure I took my evening medications, and kissed me goodnight before heading back to Flagstaff. She'd stayed overnight in Phoenix for the speaking engagement, but had to teach tomorrow. Alone in my house, I looked around at the life I'd built. Photos on the walls not just of Richard and Jessica, but of Carlos and Maria, Diana and Emma, the support group members, the people I'd helped. Evidence of a life rich with real connections, not transactional relationships. My phone buzzed. A text from Rachel Moore. Thank you for introducing me tonight. 3 people from the audience have already contacted me about joining the Tucson support group. We're making a difference, Margaret. Another text, this one from Harold Chen. Someone approached me after the event, another victim of Ruth's from the 1990s. Didn't report at the time, but wants to share his story now for the expanded edition of your book. I gave him your publisher's contact info. Hope that's okay. I smiled. The expanded edition of The Receipt of Truth was being published next year, incorporating stories from additional victims and updates on how the case had influenced elder abuse legislation in Arizona. A third text, from Linda Martinez. Margaret, the National Center on Elder Abuse wants you to keynote their annual conference next year in Washington, D.C. Interested? Washington, D.C. At 84. Part of me wanted to say no, wanted to stay home in comfortable retirement. But the bigger part, the part that had hidden behind a Walmart dumpster and documented evidence and testified in court and refused to be silenced, that part said yes. I typed back. Absolutely interested. Send me the details. Because this work wasn't finished, Ruth Patterson was dead, her family imprisoned or scattered, her crimes exposed. But there were thousands of other Ruths out there, thousands of families being exploited, thousands of elderly people suffering in silence. And as long as I had breath and strength, I would speak for them. I would tell them it's never too late. I would show them how to fight back. I would prove that victims can become survivors, and survivors can become advocates, and advocates can change the world. My name is Margaret Louise Bennett. I'm 84 years old, and I'm just getting started. 3 months after that speaking engagement in Phoenix, I received a phone call that would test everything I'd learned about forgiveness, boundaries, and the true meaning of family. It was a Friday morning in January 2031. I was sitting in my kitchen having breakfast oatmeal with fresh blueberries, a luxury I could now afford without guilt, when my phone rang with an unknown Arizona number. Mrs. Bennett? A young woman's voice, nervous and uncertain. My name is Sophia Patterson. I'm Marcus's daughter, your granddaughter. The spoon fell from my hand, clattering against the bowl. What? I know this is a shock. I just found out about you myself last week. My mom, her name is Jennifer. She and my dad had me before he married Jessica. I'm 24 now, and I've been researching our family history because I wanted to understand why my dad is in prison and why everyone in our family seems so broken. My mind reeled. Marcus had a daughter. I had a granddaughter I'd never known existed. Sophia. I don't know what to say. Does Jessica know about you? No. Dad kept me secret from everyone. My mom wasn't part of his life. She got pregnant when they were young, had me, and Dad's been paying child support but otherwise pretending I don't exist. But Miss Bennett, Grandma, I need to talk to you. I've read your book. I've read about what my dad and his family did to you, and I need to know, am I like them? Am I going to turn into a manipulator like my grandmother Ruth? The raw vulnerability in her voice broke my heart. Sophia, where are you right now? Phoenix. I drove down from Prescott where I go to college. I know I shouldn't have just shown up, but I didn't know how else to reach you, and I'm scared and confused and… Give me your address. I'm coming to you. 2 hours later, I sat across from Sophia Patterson in a coffee shop near Arizona State University. She looked nothing like Marcus. She had her mother's features, delicate and artistic, but I saw traces of Richard in her eyes. Green, like his had been, like Jessica's were. She'd brought documents, birth certificate, paternity test results, copies of child support payments, proof that she was who she claimed to be. Why now? I asked gently. Why reach out after 24 years? Because I'm getting married in June, Sophia said, tears welling up. And I'm terrified that I'm going to become like them. Like Ruth, like Gilbert, like my dad. What if it's genetic? What if I'm going to manipulate and hurt the man I love without even realizing it? I took her hands across the table. Sophia, listen to me carefully. Manipulation isn't genetic. It's learned behavior. And the fact that you're worried about it, the fact that you're seeking help to prevent it, that proves you're nothing like them. But what if I am? What if it's in my blood? It's not in your blood. It's a choice. Every day, you choose whether to be honest or manipulative, generous or exploitative, loving or using. Ruth made her choices. Marcus made his choices. And you, Sophia, you get to make yours. We talked for 3 hours. She told me about her mother Jennifer, who'd worked 2 jobs to raise her alone, who'd never badmouthed Marcus despite his absence. She told me about her fiancé David, a teacher who reminded her of the grandfather she'd never met. She told me about finding my book in the library and reading it in one sitting, then crying for 2 days straight. The worst part, Sophia said, is that I've been getting money from my dad's family all through college. Ruth and Gilbert would send me checks for birthdays and Christmas, usually $200 or $300. I thought they were being kind grandparents, but now I know that money probably came from you, from the person they were stealing from. The realization hit her visibly, her face crumpling. I've been spending your money, Grandma Margaret. I bought textbooks with it, paid rent with it. I'm just as guilty as they are. Stop, I said firmly. You didn't know. You were a child receiving gifts from grandparents. You're not guilty of anything. But I benefited from their crimes. So did Jessica. So did every restaurant they ate at. Every store they shopped at. Every person who touched that stolen money. Sophia, you can't change what happened. You can only decide what you do now. What should I do? I thought carefully before answering. You have 2 choices. You can let the guilt consume you, let the fear of becoming like them control your life. Or you can learn from their mistakes, become someone who helps others, and break the cycle. How do I break the cycle? The same way Jessica did. Through awareness, through therapy, through making different choices every single day, through building a life based on honesty instead of manipulation. Sophia wiped her eyes. Would you? Would you be willing to meet David? My fiancé? I want him to know the truth about my family before he marries me. And I want him to meet someone from my family who isn't a criminal. I would be honored. Over the next 3 months, I got to know Sophia and David. I introduced them to Jessica, who was shocked to learn she had a half-sister, but graciously welcomed Sophia into what remained of our fractured family. We had awkward dinners and difficult conversations and moments of grief for what could have been if Marcus had been honest about his daughter from the beginning. But we also had moments of joy. Sophia was intelligent, kind, and determined to build a different kind of life than the one her father's family had modeled. She was studying social work, planning to specialize in financial abuse prevention. "I can't undo what my family did," she told me, "but I can prevent others from doing it." The knowledge that Ruth's granddaughter had chosen to become a protector instead of a predator felt like poetry, like justice of the deepest kind. In June, I walked Sophia down the aisle at her wedding. Jennifer, her mother, had passed away 2 years earlier from cancer, and Sophia had no other family she wanted to ask. When she'd ask me, I'd cried for an hour straight. "You're the grandmother I should have had all along," she'd said, "the one who loves without conditions, who protects without controlling, who gives without keeping score." At the reception, I gave a toast that summarized everything I'd learned in the 11 years since Carlos Rodriguez had whispered his warning at a Walmart checkout. Family isn't defined by blood or obligation or shared last names. Family is defined by choice, by respect, by love that's demonstrated through actions, not just words. Sophia and David, you're choosing each other today, and you're choosing to build a family based on honesty and kindness. That's the only kind of family worth having. Now, as I sit here recording this final chapter of my story at 84 years old, I want to share the knowledge, the essential knowledge that I've gained through this journey. The first piece of knowledge is this: trust your instincts. If something feels wrong in your relationships with family members, if you find yourself constantly giving while they're constantly taking, if you feel manipulated or used, trust that feeling. Your instincts are trying to protect you. The second piece of knowledge is that documentation is your most powerful weapon. Keep receipts, track transactions, save messages, record conversations where legal. Evidence transforms, he said, she said, into objective truth. The third piece of knowledge is that it's never too late to fight back. I was 74 when I discovered the truth, 75 when I went to court. If I can do it, anyone can. Age doesn't determine courage. The fourth piece of knowledge is that real family, true family, doesn't exploit you. If someone claims they love you but only contacts you when they need money, that's not love. That's a transaction disguised as a relationship. The fifth and most important piece of knowledge is this: you are not alone. Millions of elderly people experience financial abuse every year. It's not your fault. It doesn't mean you're stupid or weak. It means someone you trusted betrayed that trust. But there are people who will believe you, support you, and help you fight back. These lessons are what I teach at every speaking engagement, what I write about in my books, what I tell every victim who contacts me. The first lesson is about boundaries. You can love someone and still set limits. You can care about family and still protect yourself. Boundaries aren't walls, they're doors that you control. The second lesson is about worth. Your value isn't determined by how much money you can give or how useful you are to others. You have inherent worth simply by existing. The third lesson is about redemption. People can change, but change requires acknowledging harm, making amends, and consistently demonstrating different behavior over years, not weeks. Jessica proved this. Sophia is proving it now. The fourth lesson is about community. When exploitative family pushes you away, real family, chosen family, pulls you close. Carlos and Maria, Linda Martinez, Detective O'Connor, Rachel Moore, these people became my true family. The fifth lesson is about legacy. What we leave behind isn't money or property, it's the lives we touch, the people we help, the knowledge we share that prevents others from suffering as we did. This story isn't just mine, it's a story of education. Education about recognizing exploitation, about finding courage, about fighting back. It's education for elderly people who think they're too old to matter. It's education for families about how to protect vulnerable members. It's education for law enforcement about taking these crimes seriously. It's education for society about the epidemic of elder financial abuse that we too often ignore. The education continues through programs like Jessica's work in schools, through Sophia's future career in social work, through every person who reads my book or attends a speaking engagement and learns to recognize the warning signs. And now, I want to ask you, the person hearing this story, have you or someone you love experienced something similar? Does this story resonate with your own life? Have you seen these patterns in your own family or community? If this story has touched your heart, if it's given you knowledge or hope or courage, I ask you to do 3 things. First, subscribe to the Voices of Auntie Rose YouTube channel. Click that subscribe button, ring the notification bell, and join our community of survivors and advocates. We share stories every day, stories of courage, of survival, of fighting back against those who would exploit us. Second, like and share this video. Someone in your life might need to hear this story. Someone might be suffering in silence, thinking they're alone, believing they're too old or too foolish to fight back. By sharing this video, you could save someone's life. Third, leave a comment below. Tell me your story. Tell me what this video meant to you. Tell me how it relates to your real life. I read every comment, and your voice, your experience matters. The more we speak up, the more we break the silence around elder financial abuse, the more people we can save. This isn't just entertainment. This is education. This is awareness. This is activism. Every view, every like, every share, every comment, each one is a step toward a world where elderly people are protected instead of exploited, where family means love instead of transaction, where vulnerability is respected instead of weaponized. So, I ask you, what did you think of this story? How does it connect to your real life? What lessons will you take from Margaret Bennett's journey? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear from the depths of your heart. Your experiences, your fears, your hopes, they all matter. You are not too old. You are not too weak. You are not too late. You are powerful. You are worthy. You are enough. To everyone watching this video today, I wish you good health, joyful daily living, and peace in your heart. May you be surrounded by people who love you without conditions, who give without keeping score, who stay because they want to, not because they need something. Remember, real family doesn't exploit you. Real family protects you. And if you don't have that kind of family by blood, create it by choice. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being part of the Voices of Auntie Rose community. Thank you for caring about this issue and about the millions of elderly people who suffer in silence. Please subscribe, like, share, and comment. Your engagement helps this message reach more people who need to hear it. Until next time, this is Margaret Louise Bennett reminding you, it's never too late to take your life back. Goodbye for now, and I'll see you in the next video. Stay strong, stay vigilant, stay free.